She thought he was just a broke US traveler, but when he showed up in a limousine to confess. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. The warm hum of conversation echoed through the small cafe as Emma adjusted her second-hand dress, her fingers trembling slightly. The low, golden lighting made everything feel almost too perfect, like the world outside had faded away. She was so out of place here, she could barely breathe. Her dress was a cheap thrift store find, and the scuffed shoes she wore couldn't even compete with the polished look of the other customers. She looked at herself in the window reflection, thinking how out of place she felt in a restaurant like this. I promised Jenny I'd show up, she whispered to herself, as she took a deep breath and walked inside. Her heart pounded in her chest, louder than the clinking of silverware. She scanned the room for table 7. Table 7. Table 7, she murmured, her voice barely audible. She finally spotted a man sitting alone near the back. He looked well-dressed, his dark hair perfectly styled. His face was glued to his phone. That must be him, she thought, taking another deep breath to calm her nerves. She forced a smile and walked over to him. Hi, you must be Kevin. I'm Emma, nice to meet you, she said, her voice a little too bright. The man looked up, blinking at her as if he was caught off guard. Hi, Emma, he said, his voice a bit unsure, as if trying to place her. Emma, misreading the awkwardness for shyness, slid into the seat across from him. She adjusted her napkin and cleared her throat. I know this is a bit strange, right? Blind dates are always a little awkward. Jenny told me you might be a bit quiet, so don't worry, I can talk enough for both of us, she said, laughing nervously, hoping to ease the tension. The man smiled faintly but didn't say anything at first. He seemed distracted, but something about Emma's earnestness made him hesitate. He opened his mouth to say something but stopped himself. Right. Blind dates are something else, he said with a small chuckle, his eyes softening. Emma, feeling a bit more at ease, laughed along. Tell me about it. Jenny's been trying to set me up with someone for months, but work's been crazy. How about you? What do you do? The man hesitated again before answering, his smile widening. I work in tech. Kind of like coding, apps, that sort of thing, he replied. Emma raised an eyebrow. Tech? That's cool. But I'm terrible with computers. She couldn't help but laugh at herself. He simply nodded, a subtle smile tugging at the corners of his lips as he watched her. The conversation flowed easily after that, with Emma talking about her job as a waitress, her struggles with rent, and her dreams of one day opening her own art studio. The more she talked, the more she felt a connection with this man, even if she still wasn't sure what to make of him. He wasn't like the men she usually met. His silence was somehow comforting, and she felt like she could be herself around him. But just as they were getting into a comfortable rhythm, her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, her stomach sinking. It was a message from Jenny. Hey, Emma, where are you? I'm at table 7, looking forward to meeting you, Kevin. Her heart dropped as she reread the message slowly. She looked up at the man, her face flushing with embarrassment. You're not Kevin, are you? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. His smile faltered, guilt flashing in his eyes. No, I'm not. Emma's face burned red as she scrambled to grab her coat. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I sat at the wrong table. This is so embarrassing, she muttered, standing up quickly, but the man stood too. Wait, Emma, it's okay. Really, he said, trying to calm her down, but she was already rushing toward the door, her face a picture of mortification. As she hurried away, she heard him call her name, but she couldn't bring herself to turn around. She bolted out of the restaurant, the sound of her footsteps drowned out by the Hum of traffic outside. The man watched her leave, a strange feeling twisting in his chest. It was a mix of regret, confusion, and curiosity. For some reason, he didn't want her to go. He couldn't explain why, but the thought of never seeing her again made him uneasy. He stood there for a moment, watching her disappear into the city streets, before he turned and left as well. Later that night, as Liam sat in his luxurious penthouse overlooking the glittering lights of the city, he couldn't stop thinking about her. The conversation they had seemed so different from the usual small talk he had with people in his world. Emma's honesty, her vulnerability, her genuine kindness, none of it had been what he expected. He was used to being surrounded by polished business partners and socialites who saw him as a prize, a trophy to be won. But Emma didn't even know who he was, and somehow, that made everything feel more real. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the skyline, lost in thought. He had been so close to telling her who he really was, but something about her made him hesitate. He didn't want her to see him as just another rich guy, another man with a fortune to offer. He wanted to know her for who she was, not for what he had. But now, after everything, he found himself wondering if he'd ever get the chance to see her again. "I know this is awkward, but don't worry. I'm sure it's not as bad as you think, right? I mean, you just made a mistake. We all do it, right? You're not the first to sit at the wrong table at a blind date, are you?" But Emma couldn't stop the wave of embarrassment rushing over her as she hurried out of the restaurant. Her heart pounded in her chest as she tried to collect her thoughts, but all she could focus on was the man's face, the way he had looked at her with that mix of surprise and kindness. It was confusing. Everything had felt so real. She had never felt so comfortable with someone she just met. Her nerves had started to settle, only to be completely shattered by her own mistake. "I have to get out of here," she whispered to herself, pulling her coat tighter around her body. As she stepped into the chilly night air, Emma didn't know where she was going, but she couldn't stay there any longer. She walked aimlessly down the street, the city lights blurring in her vision as her thoughts raced. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, and she quickly glanced at the screen. It was a message from Jenny. "You okay? What happened with Kevin?" She didn't know how to explain it. She didn't want to admit that she had completely embarrassed herself. She felt ridiculous. The city felt colder than it had when she first entered the restaurant, and as she walked, she tried to make sense of everything that had just happened. She hadn't even thought about it when she sat down at that table, thinking he was Kevin. She had just walked over and introduced herself, and they'd gotten along so well. It had felt so easy, almost too easy. How could she have been so wrong? A few blocks later, Emma found herself standing in front of a small park, the air crisp against her face. She took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing heart. She looked down at her phone again, her thumb hovering over the keyboard as she considered whether or not to tell Jenny what happened. She hesitated and put the phone away. The last thing she wanted was to face Jenny right now. Meanwhile, back at the restaurant, Liam sat silently at the table where Emma had just fled. He stared at the empty chair across from him, the quiet hum of the restaurant now feeling a little too loud. He couldn't shake the feeling of unease in his chest. What had just happened? He wasn't sure why it had bothered him so much when she ran out. He had meant to correct her from the start, to tell her she had the wrong person, but something had stopped him. Something about her had made him want to let the conversation unfold naturally. His phone buzzed in his pocket, snapping him out of his thoughts. It was a message from his business associate. He stared at the screen for a moment before putting the phone back in his pocket. It didn't matter right now. All he could think about was Emma and the conversation they had shared. He knew he shouldn't be thinking about her this much. She was just a waitress, and he had met her by accident. But there was something different about her. Something real. Liam sat back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. He didn't understand why he was so drawn to her, but he couldn't shake the feeling that this was something important. He had always been surrounded by people who saw him for his wealth, his status, his power. But Emma had treated him like a regular person, just someone sitting at a table, talking about life. It was refreshing. He knew he had to make things right. He couldn't just let her leave without explaining himself, without clearing up the misunderstanding. But what if she didn't want to see him again? What if she thought he was just another rich guy playing some kind of game? He couldn't let that happen. He had to be honest with her, no matter how awkward it was. As he left the restaurant, he made up his mind. He was going to find her? He didn't know how, but he would. He had to. This wasn't just a chance meeting. There was something about Emma that had made him want to believe in the possibility of something real, something honest. It wasn't something he had ever really believed in before, not with all the people he had met through the years. But with her, it felt different. Back in her apartment, Emma finally gave in and opened Jenny's message. "You sure you're okay?" Jenny had written. Emma smiled softly, her fingers hovering over the keys before she began typing. "Yeah. Just a little embarrassed. But it's fine. Don't worry about me." She sent the message and stared at the screen for a long moment, unsure of what to do next. She couldn't stop thinking about him. About the way he looked at her, the way he made her feel like she mattered, even for just a moment. He wasn't what she had expected. And yet, she couldn't get him out of her mind. Was it foolish to think that maybe, just maybe, something real could come out of this? Just as she was about to set her phone down, a soft knock at the door startled her. Her heart skipped a beat as she wondered who it could be. Slowly, she walked to the door and opened it. There, standing in front of her, was the last person she expected to see. Liam. He stood there in a sharp suit, his eyes soft but determined. "Emma, I know this is crazy, but I had to come find you," he said, his voice steady but filled with sincerity. "I owe you an explanation." Her breath caught in her throat as she stared at him. She hadn't expected this. Not in a million years. Emma stood frozen in the doorway, her breath caught in her throat as she stared at Liam. He was standing there, in his sharp suit, looking every bit the millionaire she had unknowingly shared a moment with earlier. The night air outside the door was cool, but the heat in her chest made her feel flushed, confused, and unsure of what to say. I didn't expect to see you," she finally managed to say, her voice barely a whisper, her eyes darting from his face to the ground. "I'm sorry I ran off earlier, I didn't mean to." Liam smiled softly, taking a step closer, his presence commanding yet gentle. "Emma, please, there's no need to apologize. I didn't mean to confuse you, or make you feel uncomfortable. The truth is, I wanted to explain everything to you about who I am, about why I didn't tell you the truth earlier." She looked up at him, still unsure. "You don't have to explain anything to me," she said, her words a little sharper than she intended. "I'm the one who made the mistake. I sat at the wrong table, and it was embarrassing. I'm just a waitress, Liam. A waitress who doesn't belong in places like this." Her voice cracked slightly, and she quickly wiped a tear that threatened to fall. Liam's eyes softened, and he took another step forward, closing the distance between them. "That's not true, Emma. You're not just a waitress, you're a person with dreams, with a heart full of kindness. I've never met anyone like you before. You made me feel something real, something I haven't felt in a long time." He paused, his expression earnest, his gaze unwavering. "And I didn't want to lie to you, but I had to be sure. I had to know that you would like me for who I really am, not just for what I have." Emma's heart skipped a beat at his words. She looked up at him, searching his face for any sign of insincerity, but all she saw was genuine emotion. "But you're rich, Liam," she said, the word slipping out before she could stop herself. "You don't need someone like me. You could have anyone. Why would you even care about me?" Liam sighed, his hand reaching out to gently take hers. "It's not about money, Emma. It's about connection. It's about the way you made me feel when we talked. You're different from everyone else I know. I don't care about your job, or your circumstances. I care about you." Emma felt a mix of emotion swell inside her, confusion, doubt, hope. Was it possible? Could someone like Liam, someone with so much wealth and power, truly care for someone like her? I don't know if I can believe that, she whispered, pulling her hand back slightly, not in anger but in self-protection. I've been let down too many times before. I don't want to be hurt again. Liam nodded slowly, understanding. I know, he said softly. And I wouldn't blame you if you didn't trust me right away. But I need you to know this, I'm here because I want to be, not because of anything else. And I'm not going anywhere. I've never felt like this before, Emma. You've opened my eyes to something I didn't even realize I was missing. Emma felt a warmth spread through her chest, her heart softening despite her doubts. She wanted to believe him, but part of her was scared. Scared that it was all just a dream, a fantasy that she would wake up from and find herself alone again. But why didn't you tell me who you were? Why hide it? She asked, her voice trembling. Liam took a deep breath, as if gathering his thoughts before speaking. I wanted to see if you would like me for who I am, not for what I have. I didn't want to be just another rich guy to you. I wanted to show you that I'm more than my wealth. I'm a person with flaws, with real emotions, and I care about you, Emma. She stood there, unsure of how to respond, but feeling the truth in his words. He wasn't like anyone she had ever met, and something about him made her want to believe that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't some fairy tale that would end in heartbreak. I don't know what to say, she murmured, her eyes not leaving his. Liam smiled gently, taking another step closer. You don't have to say anything right now. I just wanted you to know the truth. And if you'll give me a chance, I'll prove it to you. Emma looked at him for a long moment, her mind racing with everything he had said, and everything she was feeling. She had never been one to believe in fairy tales, but Liam's sincerity made her wonder if maybe, just maybe, there was something real between them. I need time, she said quietly, finally meeting his gaze. I'm not ready to jump into something without knowing I can trust you. Liam nodded, understanding. I'm not asking you to rush. Take all the time you need. I'll be here, whenever you're ready. Emma's heart felt heavy but hopeful at the same time. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, she was willing to take a chance on it. And with Liam, maybe it was a chance worth taking. The next few days passed in a blur for Emma. She couldn't stop thinking about Liam and the conversation they had shared. His words echoed in her mind, his promise to be there when she was ready. It felt like something she had never experienced before, someone actually waiting for her, respecting her pace, giving her time to decide what she wanted. It wasn't like the rush she felt before, the pressure of expectations. This was different. Still, she kept her distance, not ready to dive in completely. She kept her routine, working shifts at the diner, struggling to make ends meet. Every time she passed by the small coffee shop near her apartment, she couldn't help but remember the day she had sat down next to Liam. The contrast between their worlds had never felt so stark. She didn't belong in a world of luxury, in a world of endless possibilities. At least, that's what she thought. One evening, after a long shift, Emma was walking home when she saw a familiar face. It was Liam. He was standing across the street, dressed in a suit, looking just as out of place as she felt. He smiled when he saw her, a warm, gentle smile that immediately made her heart race. He didn't need to say anything. She could see it in his eyes, he wasn't going anywhere. Hi, he said, his voice steady but full of emotion. I've been thinking about you. Emma felt her pulse quicken. I'm not ready yet, she said, though she wasn't sure who she was trying to convince, him or herself. I know, Liam replied. But I want you to know that I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. And whenever you're ready, I'll be right here. She looked at him, her heart caught between doubt and hope. What did she want? Was she really ready to let someone into her life, especially someone like Liam? She wasn't sure, but she knew she couldn't keep pushing him away forever. Over the next week, they saw each other a few times. They would meet for coffee at a small cafe, just talking about life, about everything and nothing. she found herself laughing more than she had in a long time, feeling like she could actually be herself around him. He never once made her feel less than or out of place. His world didn't intimidate her anymore. One evening, Liam invited her to dinner at a local restaurant. It wasn't fancy, just a small place with dim lighting and a cozy atmosphere. As they sat at the table, the conversation flowed easily, just like it had before. He wasn't asking her to be anything she wasn't, he wasn't rushing her or pushing her to make a decision. It felt like they were simply two people getting to know each other. "I don't want to make you uncomfortable," Liam said suddenly, his voice quiet, almost as if he was hesitant to say it. "But I want you to know that I really care about you, Emma. And I'm willing to do whatever it takes to show you that." Emma swallowed, trying to steady her breath. She looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time, she allowed herself to see the man standing before her, not the billionaire, not the businessman, but just Liam, the man who had patiently waited for her, the man who had never pressured her, who had shown her more kindness than anyone ever had. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I can trust this. I don't know if I can trust myself to not mess it up." Liam reached across the table, gently taking her hand in his. "You don't have to have all the answers right now, Emma. We can take this one step at a time, at your pace. I'll be here for you, no matter what." Her heart raced at his words, the vulnerability in his eyes making it hard for her to breathe. Could it really be this simple? Could she really trust someone again? Could she let go of the fear that had kept her locked away for so long? "I think," she began, but then she stopped, unsure. She wasn't ready for a grand gesture, and she wasn't ready to throw herself into something without understanding it fully. But something inside her told her that this was different. "I think I want to try," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I want to take it slow, but I want to try." Liam's eyes softened, a smile spreading across his face. "That's all I'm asking for." The evening passed in a comfortable silence, the kind of silence that comes from two people who don't need to say much to understand each other. Emma didn't know where this would lead, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like maybe, just maybe, it was worth taking the chance. As they walked out of the restaurant together, Liam stopped at the door and turned to face her. "I'm glad you're giving us a chance, Emma. I promise you won't regret it." She smiled softly, a flicker of hope igniting in her chest. "We'll see," she said, her voice warm with the possibility of what was to come. It had been a few weeks since Emma and Liam started seeing each other. They had taken things slow, just like Emma wanted, and with each passing day, she found herself opening up more, trusting him more. It wasn't easy, but every time they shared a quiet moment together, she felt a little more at peace, a little more sure of herself, of him, and of what they were building. Liam was everything she hadn't expected, and yet everything she needed. His patience, his understanding, his willingness to let her take her time, had been more than she could have asked for. But there was still a lingering fear inside her, a voice that whispered that maybe, just maybe, it was too good to be true. One evening, as they sat on the small balcony of her apartment, sipping tea and watching the city skyline twinkle under the setting sun, Emma couldn't help but voice the question that had been nagging her for weeks. "Liam, do you ever get scared? I mean, with everything we've been through, do you ever wonder if it's all just too much?" Liam turned to her, his gaze soft but steady. He took a deep breath, as if weighing his words carefully. "Of course, I get scared," he said, his voice low but firm. "I'm scared of losing you. I'm scared that I'm not doing enough to show you how much you mean to me. But I also know that sometimes, the things worth having come with a little fear. And you're worth it, Emma." His words took Emma by surprise, and for a moment, she didn't know how to respond. She had expected him to reassure her, to tell her that everything was perfect and that there was nothing to fear. But instead, he had spoken from his heart, admitting his own vulnerabilities, his own uncertainties. It made her feel seen, understood, and for the first time, she realized that maybe the fear she felt wasn't something to run from, it was something they could face together. "I'm scared too," she whispered, her eyes meeting his. "I'm scared that I'll mess this up, that I'll hurt you somehow, or that I'll pull away again because I don't know how to be vulnerable." Liam reached over and gently took her hand, his touch warm and grounding. You don't have to be perfect, Emma. I'm not asking for perfection. I'm asking for honesty, for trust, for us to be real with each other. And if you ever feel like pulling away, I'll be right here, waiting for you. I won't give up on us. Emma felt a lump in her throat, and for a moment, she was afraid the tears she had been holding back would spill over. But instead, she smiled softly, a tear slipping down her cheek as she squeezed his hand. I don't want to pull away, she said, her voice shaky but resolute. I want to be here. I want to be with you, Liam. He smiled back at her, his eyes filled with tenderness. Then we'll take it one step at a time, together. There's no rush, Emma. No deadlines. Just us. And with that, Emma felt the weight on her chest begin to lift. She knew there would still be moments of doubt, moments where the fear would creep in, but for the first time, she felt ready to face those moments with him by her side. It wasn't about perfection, it was about learning to trust, learning to love, and learning to be there for each other, no matter what. Over the next few weeks, their relationship continued to grow. They spent their days exploring the city together, enjoying quiet dinners, and having long conversations about everything and nothing. They talked about their hopes and dreams, their pasts, and their fears, always with the understanding that they were building something real, something meaningful. And one evening, as they stood on the balcony again, watching the stars twinkle above, Liam turned to Emma with a look of quiet determination in his eyes. Emma, I don't know what the future holds, but I know that I want you in it. You've changed my life in ways I didn't even think were possible. And I want to keep building a life with you, if you'll have me. Emma looked at him, her heart swelling with emotion. She had never felt more certain about anything in her life. Yes, she said, her voice firm and full of warmth. Yes, Liam. I want that too. And in that moment, they both knew that this wasn't just the beginning of a relationship, it was the start of something much deeper, much more profound. Something that would take them through the highs and lows, the twists and turns of life, but always with the knowledge that they had each other. And for the first time, Emma felt truly, deeply, at home. It had been a few months since Emma and Liam had made the decision to take their relationship to the next level. They were no longer just two people navigating the awkwardness of early dates, but a couple learning about each other, building trust, and growing together. Every day felt like a new chapter, and each moment with Liam made her feel more and more like she belonged, like she was worthy of love, despite all the doubt she had carried for so long. Emma had always been cautious with her heart, afraid of getting hurt, afraid of repeating the mistakes of the past. But with Liam, she felt a sense of security she had never known. He was patient with her, understanding when she needed space, but always there when she needed him the most. And every time they were together, she felt herself letting go of the walls she had built around her heart, piece by piece. One Saturday afternoon, they decided to spend the day out of the city, away from the noise and distractions. They drove to a small, quiet town by the beach, just the two of them, with no plans other than to enjoy the day together. As they walked along the shoreline, the sound of the waves crashing against the rocks was the only thing filling the air, and it felt like the world was theirs alone. Liam reached for her hand, his fingers interlacing with hers. I've been thinking about something, he said, his voice serious but gentle. Emma looked up at him, her brow furrowing slightly. What's on your mind? She asked, her voice soft. Liam stopped walking and turned to face her, his expression full of thought. I want to be with you, Emma. I've known that from the moment I met you. And I know we've talked about taking things slow, and I respect that. But I'm ready to take the next step, to really build a life with you. I want to make this official. Emma's heart skipped a beat. She had never imagined that she would find someone who made her feel so understood, so loved. But hearing Liam say those words, knowing he was ready to commit to her, to their future, filled her with a sense of joy and excitement she hadn't felt in years. You mean, like, officially? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. Liam nodded, his gaze unwavering. Yes. I don't want to waste any more time. I want you in my life, Emma. Not just for a few months or years, but for as long as we both can. I want to be there for you through everything, through the good and the bad. I'm not going anywhere. Emma felt a rush of emotions overwhelm her, a mix of happiness, relief, and even fear. She had never been one to dive headfirst into big decisions, especially when it came to matters of the heart. But this was different. She knew it. She could feel it deep in her bones. Liam. She began, her voice thick with emotion. I've never felt this way before. You make me feel like I'm enough. I'm scared, but I'm also ready. I want this too. I want to build a future with you. Liam's face broke into a wide smile, and he pulled her into a hug, wrapping his arms around her tightly. You have no idea how much that means to me, he whispered in her ear. They stood there for a long moment, simply holding each other, letting the sound of the waves wash over them. Emma could feel the warmth of his embrace, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, and for the first time in a long time, she felt at peace. She didn't know what the future held, but with Liam by her side, she was ready to face it, to embrace it. As they continued their walk along the beach, Liam stopped and turned to her again, his eyes twinkling with mischief. I have one more thing I want to ask you, he said, a playful smile tugging at his lips. Emma raised an eyebrow, curious. What is it? Liam dropped down to one knee, pulling out a small box from his pocket. Emma's heart stopped for a moment as she realized what was happening. Emma, will you marry me? He asked, his voice filled with sincerity and love. Tears welled up in Emma's eyes as she looked down at him, her heart overflowing with emotion. She had never imagined this moment in her wildest dreams, but now that it was happening, she couldn't picture her life any other way. Yes, she whispered, her voice shaky with emotion. Yes, Liam, I will marry you. Liam stood up, a look of pure joy on his face, and kissed her deeply, sealing the promise they had made to each other. And in that moment, Emma knew that she had found something special, something real. A love that was worth fighting for, worth building a future around, and a love that would last for a lifetime. It was a month later, and Emma could hardly believe how much her life had changed. The days had blended together into one continuous stream of joy, excitement, and sometimes even nervousness. She had moved in with Liam into his penthouse, a place she never imagined she'd step foot in, much less live in. The first few days had been a whirlwind of settling in, rearranging her things, and getting used to the opulence of it all. But even in the midst of all the luxury, it was the moments with Liam that made everything feel real, that made it feel like home. One evening, as they sat on the balcony, watching the sun set behind the city skyline, Liam turned to her, his eyes soft. I've been thinking, he started, his voice filled with thoughtfulness. Emma looked over at him, sensing the weight in his words. About what? She asked, curious. Liam took a deep breath, his hands gently clasping hers. About us, he said simply. About the future. I know we've only been together for a short time, but I want you to know that I'm all in, Emma. I want to build something real with you, something lasting. Not just a quick romance, but a life. Our life. Emma's heart skipped a beat at his words. She had always dreamed of a love like this, something deep and meaningful, but hearing Liam speak about it so seriously made her heart swell. She had never felt so sure of anything in her life. I want that too, she said quietly, squeezing his hand. I want to build that life with you. Liam smiled, but there was something in his eyes, something that made Emma feel like there was more to what he was saying. I've been thinking about our wedding, he continued, his voice steady. I know we haven't talked about it much, but I want to ask you something. Emma's heart raced, her stomach flipping. She had always imagined the moment when Liam would ask her to marry him, but she hadn't expected it to come so soon. She swallowed hard, trying to steady her breath. What is it? She asked, barely able to hide her anticipation. Liam paused, as if carefully choosing his next words. I know we've only been engaged for a little while, but I want to make sure we do this right. I want to make it everything you've ever dreamed of. I want our wedding to be perfect, Emma. I want to know everything that matters to you. She stared at him, unsure of how to respond. Of course, she had dreamed of the perfect wedding, but that was all it had ever been, just a dream. She hadn't thought it would actually happen, not in the way Liam was describing it. He was offering her a fairy tale, a dream come true, but all she could think of was how unreal it felt. I don't know, she said slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. I never thought I would get something like this. A wedding, a life with you, it just feels like something out of a movie. Liam took a step closer, his hands cupping her face gently. It's real, Emma. It's all real. You don't have to pinch yourself to see that. You deserve this. You deserve me, and you deserve a future that's filled with love, and happiness, and everything you've ever wanted. Emma's eyes filled with tears at his words, and she felt an overwhelming surge of emotion. I never thought I could have this, she whispered, her voice shaking. I never thought I could be this happy. You make me feel like I'm worth something. Liam kissed her forehead softly, his arms wrapping around her as he held her close. You are worth everything, Emma. You've always been worth everything. The weight of his words settled over her like a warm blanket, and for the first time in her life, Emma truly felt like she had found her place in the world. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She wasn't just someone who had to struggle every day to make ends meet. She was someone's everything, someone's partner, someone's love. As the days passed, they began planning their wedding, though not in the way Emma had expected. It wasn't about the extravagant venues or the designer dresses. It was about the people they loved, the family they would create, and the commitment they were making to each other. It was about the promise of a lifetime, one built on trust, patience, and love. The day of the wedding arrived sooner than she had imagined, and Emma felt a rush of emotions as she stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the simple dress she had chosen. It wasn't anything extravagant, but it was perfect for her. Liam was waiting for her, and as she looked at her reflection, she saw a woman who had finally found her place in the world, someone who had been given a second chance at love. When she walked down the aisle, her heart was pounding, but her steps were steady. She could feel the eyes of the guests on her, but all she could see was Liam standing at the end, smiling at her. The moment their eyes met, everything else faded away. It wasn't about the wedding, the guests, or the decorations, it was about the two of them, about the life they were about to begin together. Liam's smile widened as she reached him, and as they exchanged vows, Emma knew without a doubt that this was where she was meant to be. This was her happily ever after. Not because everything was perfect, but because they had built something real, something that would last. And for the first time in her life, Emma felt like she truly belonged. The weeks following their wedding were a whirlwind of joy and new beginnings for Emma and Liam. The small, intimate ceremony they had envisioned had been everything they had hoped for, surrounded by the people they loved, and with a promise to each other that felt as solid as the earth beneath their feet. The simple moments, like sharing a cup of coffee on the balcony or holding hands while walking through the park, made Emma realize just how much love could fill her heart without needing grand gestures. She wasn't the same woman who had walked into Liam's life months ago. She was someone different, someone who knew she deserved happiness, someone who had found it in him. But life, as it often does, came with its challenges. It wasn't all smooth sailing. The honeymoon phase eventually wore off, and reality set in. Emma continued to work part-time at the local art gallery, a job she loved, but the pressure of balancing a career with her new life at Liam's penthouse was starting to take its toll. Liam was busy with his work, as always, and while he supported her every step of the way, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't contributing enough to their relationship. She was used to doing everything herself, but now, in this new chapter of her life, she sometimes felt like an outsider, unsure of where she truly fit into Liam's world. One evening, as they sat in their cozy living room, Liam noticed the tension in her posture. She had been quiet all night, and though she had been laughing at his jokes earlier, her smile now seemed forced. He watched her for a moment, before setting his book aside. "Emma, is everything okay?" he asked, his voice gentle but concerned. Emma hesitated for a moment, her fingers fidgeting with the hem of her sleeve. She had been holding back, not wanting to burden him, but the weight of her feelings was becoming too much to keep inside. I don't know, she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. I feel like I'm not doing enough. I feel like I'm not the person you thought I would be. Like I'm not living up to your expectations. Liam frowned, his expression softening with understanding. Emma, listen to me, he said, his voice full of warmth and reassurance. You are everything I could have ever wanted. This isn't about expectations or being perfect. It's about us, and what we're building together. I don't need you to do anything more than what you're already doing. Just being you, just being here with me, is enough. But I don't feel like I'm enough, Emma admitted, tears welling up in her eyes. I feel like I'm always trying to catch up, always feeling like I'm not contributing enough, like I don't belong in your world. Liam moved closer, his hand reaching for hers, and he gently pulled her into his arms. You belong with me, Emma. You belong right here, in this life, in this world we're creating together. We're partners, remember? This isn't just about you or me, it's about us. We're in this together, and there's no enough or not enough. There's just love. There's just us. Emma closed her eyes, taking a deep breath as his words sank in. The warmth of his embrace made her feel grounded, reminded her that she wasn't alone in this. She had spent so much time trying to prove herself to others, trying to meet expectations that weren't even real. But Liam didn't need her to be anyone other than who she was. He loved her for everything she was, flaws and all. And that was enough. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice full of emotion. I just didn't know how to handle everything. I never imagined I could have this kind of life, this kind of love. Liam kissed her forehead, his touch soft and tender. There's nothing to apologize for, he said, his voice filled with sincerity. We're learning together, Emma. We're building this life one day at a time, and I wouldn't want anyone else by my side. You are exactly who I want, exactly who I need. As the days passed, Emma felt lighter, the burden she had been carrying slowly lifting. She knew that things wouldn't always be perfect, and there would still be moments when she felt unsure of herself, but she also knew that with Liam by her side, she could face anything. Their love wasn't about perfection, it was about acceptance, understanding, and growing together. And that was more than enough. One evening, as they sat on their balcony, watching the stars twinkle in the night sky, Emma turned to Liam with a smile. You know, she said softly, I think I'm finally starting to believe that I am enough. Liam smiled back at her, his eyes shining with pride and love. You always were, Emma. You always were. And in that moment, as they held each other close, Emma knew that this was where she belonged, right where she was, with Liam, the man who had shown her what true love was all about. Months passed and Emma and Liam's life together became a beautiful routine. Every morning, they would share coffee on the balcony, watching the sun rise over the city. Every evening, they would unwind together, talking about their day, sharing their thoughts, and making each other laugh. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And in those real moments, Emma realized that she had everything she needed. The quiet love that had grown between them, the understanding, the support, and most of all, the commitment they had to each other. Liam's business continued to thrive, and Emma's art gallery work flourished as well. They supported each other's passions, cheered each other on, and created a space where they both felt valued, understood, and, most importantly, loved. But as life often goes, challenges appeared even in the most content moments. It wasn't always easy balancing their individual dreams with their life together, but it was always worth it. One evening, as the two of them sat on their couch, scrolling through wedding photos from their small, intimate ceremony, Emma couldn't help but smile. She still remembered that moment when she had walked down the aisle, not knowing exactly where this journey would take her but feeling the undeniable pull of love that had led her to this point. She glanced at Liam, her heart swelling with affection. I can't believe how much we've come through together, she said softly, her voice full of gratitude. Liam turned to her, a soft smile on his face, his eyes full of warmth. We've come a long way, haven't we? But we've done it together. And that's all that matters. Emma's heart swelled at his words. It hadn't always been easy. She had struggled with doubts, fear, and insecurities. But with Liam, she had found a kind of peace she never knew was possible. "You've given me a life I never thought I could have," she whispered. "A love I never thought I could deserve." Liam reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "Emma, you've always been worthy of this. You've always been worthy of love. You just needed to realize it, and I'm so glad I got to be here with you, helping you see that." Tears welled up in Emma's eyes as she looked at him. He was the man she had always dreamed of, but never thought she would find. "I love you," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I love you more than I ever thought I could love anyone." Liam smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners as he leaned forward to kiss her. "I love you, too, Emma. More than anything." As their kiss deepened, the world around them seemed to fade away. The uncertainties of life, the worries of the future, they all seemed insignificant in that moment. All that mattered was this love, this connection they had built, and the promise they had made to each other to always be there, no matter what. Years passed, and with each year, their bond only grew stronger. They had weathered the storms, navigated the highs and lows, and come out stronger on the other side. They built their family, both literally and figuratively, surrounding themselves with people they loved and who loved them in return. Their love story was no longer just about the two of them, it was about the life they had created, the family they had built, and the memories they had made along the way. One evening, as they sat together, watching their children play in the yard, Liam turned to Emma, his voice filled with a quiet contentment. "I've spent my whole life building empires, building businesses, but nothing compares to this. To you, to us, to the life we've created." Emma smiled, her heart full, knowing that they had both found something far more valuable than all the wealth in the world. They had found each other, and in each other, they had found everything they ever needed. "We have everything we need, Liam," she said softly, resting her head on his shoulder. And with that, as the sun set on another day, Emma and Liam knew that they had created a love story far greater than anything either of them had ever imagined. It wasn't a story of wealth or grand gestures, it was a story of trust, love, and commitment. It was their story, and it was everything they had ever wanted. A story that would continue for the rest of their lives, as they walked through it hand in hand, knowing that together, they could face anything that came their way.